So let's turn our attention now to the life and times of Thomas Hobbes. Now, prior to Hobbes's birth was a period that began a very, very long period of civil and political unrest in England. And it begins in 1547. In 1547, at the age of 9, Edward VI ascends to the throne of England. His father, Henry VIII, had just died, and so Edward ascends to the throne as the legitimate ruler of England. His reign only lasted a short time. In 1553, he dies at the age of 15. His mother, Lady Jane Grey, succeeded him, but her reign lasts a total of 9 days. Mary I, who was Henry's first daughter by his first marriage, overthrew Lady Jane Grey and took the throne. Now, Mary wanted to roll back the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, and reinstate Catholicism as the only religion in England. And as part of her efforts to accomplish this, Mary burned an estimated 300 people. About another 100 people are estimated to have died in prison. And so it was a pretty brutal revolt that earned her the name Bloody Mary. She wasn't a popular monarch, and then she made a rather unpopular move. She agreed to marry Philip II, who was the king of Spain and Portugal. And this was a widely unpopular move, and it led to what's called Watt's Revolt, that she was able to put down forcibly in 1554. Now, her reign only lasts for another 4 years. She dies in 1558, and at that time Elizabeth I becomes queen. Elizabeth I actually was queen for a fairly long period of time, but her monarchy wasn't without a great deal of conflict and strife. So in 1568, Mary Stuart, who was the Queen of Scotland, fled Scotland to England. Now, Mary Stuart had some claim on the throne of England, and there were a number of attempts to get rid of Elizabeth and bring Mary Stuart to the throne. And in 1587, after the third such attempt, and the second one in which she had pretty much directly been implicated, Mary, Queen of Scots, was executed by Elizabeth. And it's at this point, after about 41 years of political and social turmoil and war, that Thomas Hobbes is born in London in 1588. And of course, 1588 is the same year that the Spanish Armada sails against England. And that Armada sailed in response to the execution of Mary Stuart. But this, of course, wasn't the end of the turmoil. Right? And it wasn't the only difficulty that faced Hobbes in his own life. Now, he was abandoned by his father, who had to flee London when he was very young. Now, he was raised by a rich uncle, and he attended Oxford University where he studied the classics. But nevertheless, he was abandoned by his natural father, and he grew up in a period in England that contained a great deal of civil and political discord. And in fact, he wrote tracts supporting the monarchy, and as a result, had to flee England, felt that he had to flee England for his own safety for about 11 years. So during the period of the English Civil Wars, so from 1642 to 1646, and then again from 1646 to 1650, Hobbes was actually in Paris because he felt that his advocacy of the monarchy potentially put him in danger during this period of English Civil War. Now, in 1651, Hobbes publishes Leviathan, his major political and philosophical treatise. And that's the same year that he returned from 11 years of exile in Paris. Now, Leviathan argues that people should submit to royal authority, but not because it's divine providence, but because it's royal authority, monarchy, that has the unique power to protect people from civil disorder. Now, Hobbes's advocacy of monarchy isn't really what he's sort of most famously remembered for nowadays. The Leviathan is probably best remembered for his arguments that there are eternal and immutable natural rights and natural laws. Now, this is something that Rachel's doesn't focus on in the chapter, but it's intellectually quite important. And there were a number of different doctrines that Hobbes knits together into his worldview that we don't normally associate. Some of them are political, and some of them have to do with rights and with the nature of people. So, one of the important contributions that Hobbes makes to thinking is to conceive of human beings as part of the natural order. And specifically, he thought of human beings as just natural objects. And as natural objects, their activities were governed by laws that were analogous to the laws that governed physical objects. So just as gravity is a force that causes objects to be set in motion when they're unrestrained in the gravitational field, right? Hobbes thought of rational agents as also being driven by desires and by aversions. And he talked about them in a way that was strongly analogous to natural laws. So Hobbes views human beings as natural elements of the natural world. Now, in contrast to that, Hobbes views the state as an artificial creation. It's a bit of artificial by human beings. And so, while human beings are natural, the state itself is an invention of humanity. It does not exist naturally for Hobbes. Now, Hobbes advocated a type of sovereign absolutism. So the sovereign had all powers, absolute powers. But that's a little bit strange to say, given that he also thought the sovereign only had these powers because of the consent of the governed, because they implicitly agree to the social contract. And the sovereign, while he does have, or she does have absolute powers, is also constrained by natural rights and natural laws and how the sovereign executes that power. In addition to that, Hobbes attributes rights to individuals, which is something that's pretty out of the mainstream at that time. And he talks about the equality of people. All people are roughly equal in Hobbes's mind, and this is also a radical idea. Finally, he's got a sort of liberal interpretation of the law that isn't common then either. And that liberal interpretation is that people are legally allowed to do anything that isn't expressly and explicitly forbidden by the law. And so in this way, Hobbes is much more libertarian than the people of his times as well. In the next section, we'll turn to Hobbes's actual views as he discusses them in the Leviathan.